And we're live. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the Mojo Show, your real estate podcast where we talk everything real estate. I'm your host, Joe Mortgage.
And I'm Cup of Joe Mortgage.
This week's episode, we're kicking off our new 5-part series on investment properties 101, sort of a blueprint, if you will, for beginners. And this week, we're going to focus on the BRRRR method. But before we get to that, coffee talk this morning, Joe. I've been looking forward to this one.
I am not.
You're not
looking forward to this.
So pushing buttons are really easy. Honest, it is.
Well, but you got to know what buttons to push. Like I know what buttons to push on my wife. You know, if I want to have an angry wife and have fun for that day, I know what button to push in the morning. But when it comes to this show and this computer, you run it all. And last week, we're already off to a better start than last week. Let's put it that way.
I'm actually here. I actually
start
the show.
And we had intro music coming in, you know.
Yes.
So
yes. For those of you tuning in, didn't see last week's episode. So 2 minutes or about 90 seconds before the show started, I completely lost power. Right. My neighborhood all lost power. So I had to wait for my Wi-Fi to boot back up, my computer to boot back up, all of this stuff to be able to log back on and hit the go button. Thankfully, Joe already hit the go button, but wasn't able to hit any of the other buttons on there. So
not at all.
We'll have to have a quick 5-minute training session on what buttons to push over there on the screen to make.
Probably going to take a couple of 5-minute training sessions. Like my wife says, she got to tell me things over and over before I get it right. So just get used to it, Joe. Just get used to it. So.
Oh, wow.
Well, I know you had a fun-filled day yesterday of going up and getting your daughter into the dorm up at TWU. How did that go?
Yeah, that was a long day. That was a long day there at TW, but it was great. She's super pumped. She's a sophomore this year, and got a great dorm room to move in. She's on the 17th floor.
Oh wow,
17th.
All of Denton.
I cannot think of the last time I went up 17 flights of stairs.
Especially moving somebody in.
Yes. Now, thankfully, and that's one of the cool things that they do now at universities. They've got the move-in crew, right? So you just kind of pull up in the almost like a drive-through. They unload your car with all the stuff in these big boxes, and then they cart it up to your room, right? Okay. And you don't have to tip them or anything like at a hotel. I mean, your bags and stuff. Really cool. Because I could not imagine all the trips it would have taken to go up those 17 flights of stairs.
Right.
Would have been miserable. Right. But
well, they did have an elevator, right? You didn't actually have to walk up the stairs, did you?
Just once, because the elevator line to take the elevator was like a half hour. I'm not kidding. It was a half hour long line just to take the elevator to the floor you needed to go to.
I got you. Well, that this kind of goes into what our show is about today for anybody listening that has college age kids. You know, after the first year of dorms, maybe you don't want to deal with that anymore and the moving. This is a great show for you today to learn how to get some investment property, especially in college towns. So, you know, I can't wait to have our guest speaker on here. And I'm glad that your daughter's in, and I'm glad that, you know, 17th floor. I've been in those dorms. I mean, back in the 90s when I was in college in North Texas, and I know you can see everything from up there. So
yeah, well, you got one more year, and your son's going to be going through this, right?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Just keep kicking me while I'm down here, buddy.
I'll help you through it.
There you go.
Help you through it, buddy.
There you go.
Right. Well, let's jump into our guest for today because I'm super excited to have him on the show. Been wanting to get him on the show because of his in-depth knowledge on all of this stuff. He's been a real estate investor for over 2 decades, focused on growing cash flow through various types of investment models. Graduated from University of Texas, the Dallas campus, with a degree in mathematics to teach, but pivoted to asset management. He's also an avid jiu-jitsu practitioner. Please welcome to the show, everyone, Trevor Reed.
Hi. It's a high budget crowd here. I love it.
Right? Got to move everybody around.
Yeah.
So, well, Trevor, thank you for coming on. Before we get started into today's show, kind of tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, not just business, but just about you in general.
Sure. Yeah, I moved here, 2002 from Montana. Went down here, was going to go to Austin, didn't like the school. I didn't like the city. I'm from a smaller town, and it was crazy to go to Austin. And came up here into the Dallas area and started to just go to school, waited tables. I did fine dining and eventually was going to go into teaching. So got a math degree and did that whole deal, and then ended up shortly after switching to asset management. I worked in apartments and kind of worked through that, moved all the way up, and eventually was overseeing multiple large apartment complexes, about 1,000 units in 3 different states, and handled everything on those properties from budgeting to insurance to legal things, HR, basically everything you could think of. The owner, it's owner managed, and I was essentially doing what he would do if he wanted to do that job. Picked up real estate license early and then went on, and I don't do real estate as much in terms of helping other people, but use it for my own investments, and have been significantly doing much more on the loan side and kind of doing insurance and dabbling all things real estate for, going on 20 something years now. I been married 16 years. We have 5 kids.
Congratulations.
What was that?
16 years and 5 kids.
And 5 kids. I only have 1 daughter, so that's the perfect amount. And been doing
Don't get me started
for a while. And that's probably my takes up probably too much of my time, would be what I'm told, but it's pretty great. So been just plugging away.
You do a great job juggling it, along with getting your kids involved in jiu-jitsu too, so that, the things that you're doing there. Anybody listening, viewing today, make sure you ask comment or questions in the comments. Ask Trevor anything that's on your mind. I know he's one that he's done this for 20 years, right? He's also been doing this along with other things. So it's not just in investment purchases he does. He also does mortgages. He does real estate sales, and he also does insurance. So he's kind of a guru of everything. So I'm glad to have you on here. So if you have comments or questions, please ask them as we're going through this, but we're going to dive in. And, we've had this one show where we talked about the BRRRR method. So Trevor, can you share with the viewers what the BRRRR method is when it comes to buying investment properties?
Yeah. So BRRRR in and of itself is just an acronym. And so each letter, the BRRRR, stands for something different. So you're going to have buy, which would be buying the home. Rehab, basically you're fixing it up. You're renting it. Now that it looks nice, you're going to rent it out to people who need to live there. Then what you're going to do is refinance the home so you can have a better rate. You're going to have better terms, so your monthly payment's lower, which means you get to keep more rent. And then repeat. That's the final R. That just means we do the whole thing over again. So it allows the normal person without just a huge amount of money to be able to go through a process of purchasing a home, fixing it, and coming out of it, being able to do it over again. So it doesn't take all their money. It doesn't take, hopefully, all their time, probably a lot of their sanity, but you're able to kind of go through it, and it is approachable for anyone doing any kind of job. You can be a teacher, firefighter, any of these jobs that you would associate, hey, they're not a $500,000 a year earner. It's like, you don't need to make that kind of money to be able to do this. And that's why this in the investment world is probably the most utilized approach to being able to purchase properties, and one of the most effective.
So when we're talking about this method, are you talking about buying it as your primary first in most cases, or is this truly just finding investment properties and buying them as investment properties? Kind of. And if you're talking about both, kind of let's go into that a little bit too, because I think some people hear the BRRRR method of buy, rehab, rent, repeat, and all, refinance, repeat. But, I think there's different stages of each person's life that this could fit. So kind of, can we touch on that? Like, which way are you talking about when you're doing this? For people that are starting out the business, maybe younger, and then those ones that maybe already established and have their primary, how they would utilize it.
So the BRRRR method in and of itself is aimed towards investors. That's why the third letter or acronym is RENT, because you're obviously, they do have situations where you could buy a home, live in it, and then you're going to rent it out and you go buy a new primary. That would be more of what we would call like a house hack.
Okay.
The BRRRR method is more specifically associated with an investor. And it could be a first-time investor, or honestly, anyone who has, name the number, 7, 10, 15 rentals. They'll use this exact same method all the way through. So if this is your first rental and you do the BRRRR method for your first rental, you will be able to rinse and repeat that for life. There's no need to, once you hit a certain amount of loans, you can't do the BRRRR method anymore. That's not the case. You can do this forever. So if you get really good at it from your first one, I wish my first I did a BRRRR on. I did not. I was not, I'd had to kind of learn all this over the years. Absolutely, if I'm a first-time investor, I would go this route unless you have no time and no patience. And there's other factors that are not financially tied that maybe it's not the best choice for you. But yeah, I would be doing this whether it's your first time investment or you're 10 deep. But yeah, it would not be a primary, but it would be for any investment home.
All right. No, and the reason I ask that is because, just trying to figure out the BRRRR method is truly one that, if you have that extra money to sitting around, what down payment in this method are people needing to make sure they have saved up, and then maybe some set aside for the renovations and things like that. But how much for a down payment are they looking at in this method?
So the great thing with this method is that it's not a standardized kind of down payment. Like when you think of buying your primary home, you'll hear, FHA is 3.5%, or a conventional is 3 or 5% minimum. That's pretty tangible to say, okay, the house is 200,000. Great. I need to show up. I need to have 6,000 for down payment, and then I need closing costs. The thing with a BRRRR is that you're going to be buying a home that is typically, you'll hear ugly. It's an ugly home. And all that means is it needs a lot of work. So whether that's foundation or the roof's bad, or maybe the home had a small fire, or you fill in the blank. I mean, there's a huge sliding scale from ugly to super ugly, somewhere in that ballpark. And typically what happens is you're going to purchase that home with some sort of private money. And that's where people get kind of a little scared, because they hear private money and they're like, well, I don't have a rich uncle, so I can't do this. It's like, no, there's other options out there, such as like hard money. And hard money is essentially a bank or an investor that will say, hey, I will give you this money for a short period of time. And that short period of time is the time in which you as the buyer are going to do all the repairs. You're going to buy the house, you're going to get contractors in, you're going to do the renovating part. You're going to fix the house up. And then once the house is pretty, now you will refinance that into a more of a conventional loan that all of us would be familiar with, that is associated with a down payment. The great thing is that if you bought a home, and I always use the simple numbers, you buy a home at $100,000. This is, I understand you're not going to find this home in reality, but for numbers' sake, you buy the home at 100,000, you put 50,000 into it as rehab to fix it up. Now you have spent 150,000. You refinance it and it's worth 200,000. You only owe 150. So that difference of 50,000, that is essentially your down payment.
Okay.
And you didn't spend $1 of that money, that 50,000, because you gained, the value of the home went up due to all your rehab, and you bought it at a good deal. And the great thing is if you use hard money, not only will the investor pay the 100,000 and give you that money to buy the home for that 100,000 initially, they will also give you all the rehab money, $50,000 to fix it. So now the question is, okay, how much money do I need? That is where you shop these different hard money lenders. And some of them will say, you know what, Joe, you're a first-time investor. You're a little suspect. We're going to give you this loan, but we're going to charge you 2% of the loan amount. So in that scenario, if it's 100,000 purchase, 50,000 rehab, 150, they're going to charge you 2%. They charge you $3,000. You would need that plus whatever closing costs were associated with it, depending on how you bought the property. You could look on that scenario showing up with less than $10,000 to be able to purchase that property. And then you're going to refinance that property after you fix it up, and you'll have to pay for another closing because you're going to move it from hard money to your more conventional lending. And again, that could be $4,000 or $5,000. So all day on that property, for example, you could have spent less than $15,000. I've recently done one that was in Louisville, and it ended up being like I ended up having a loan at the end of the day of like $280,000, and it was worth $400,000, and I spent about $7,000 total, the whole thing, to be able to do that.
Wow.
And that's using this exact method. And again, you're using someone else's money to buy and fix the property. And then you are getting all the benefits of the equity value that's been gained from you doing that. So there is no set down payment. And that's why this is the last acronym, the last letter, repeat. That's why you're able to repeat this. If you had to show up with 20%, 25%, plus all of your rehab costs, unless, again, you are just flush with money, message me and we'll talk. You're going to run out of money. And that gets discouraging, especially if you do it and you knock it out of the park and you're getting cash flow, you have great tenants, you got great equity in this property, and you're like, man, I want to do this again, but I have no money. So this is the ability for you to keep doing that without being limited, which is one of the best benefits of it.
So go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, in the analogy that you gave initially, for easy numbers, right? 100,000, you buy something for 100,000. It's ugly. You need to fix it up. 50,000 into it to kind of rehab it, if you will, and then the value jumps to 200,000. That's the ideal situation, right? Yeah. And it sounds like you recently found a home to be able to do that with, right? How do you find those, though? I mean, because that's got to be a certain home to be. That's just not any home. I mean, how do you find those kind of homes?
So I tell everyone, and I mean, y'all are in the industry. What do you do right now if you want to help generate business for loans, or you want to help generate it if you're a realtor? What do? You let people know what you do. So if you are looking for a home, you're looking for a rental home, you let everybody know, because your sphere of friends and influence, these are the people that trust you already. And you have to realize some people selling homes, they just don't want to deal with it. It's a lot of work. They have to, especially if homes are on the market longer, you have to show, you have to clean your house. I mean, I remember we sold a home. We had 3 kids at the time. You had to clean your house all the time. You're on pins and needles forever. And the more kids you have, the shorter your fuse is of just being like,
along with dogs, animals.
Yeah. Oh, pets. I mean, all of it. And you'll have people that'll be like, hey, you know what? My mom, we're moving her to somewhere else. She has a home, fill in the blank. Do you know anyone who might be interested in this house? It needs a lot of work. I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with it right now. That's the kind of people who will approach you, but they're not going to approach you if they don't know you're looking. So I tell people off the bat, tell people, if you're out hanging out with friends, you're in a club, you want to message on socials, hey, I'm looking for a rental. If anyone knows anyone's selling, I'm looking to buy something, especially if it needs a lot of work, I'm happy to take that on. You will find people always organically that will come out and be like, hey, my cousin just told me they're trying to sell their house. I've had no luck selling it. You want to take a look at it? And again, your cousin might be trying to ask for the moon. Right. All right, you move on. But just those conversations initially. After that, you're going to be working. Ideally, I like to tell people, team up with a realtor who knows investments and knows what to look for. They're going to be a resource. They can be looking and you can be looking. I found one of my second houses I found on Craigslist, which was about as suspect as you get. And I remember my wife was like, all right, this is like all of our money. And I don't even trust a couch off Craigslist, but that it was there. I went and looked at it and it worked out great. Don't limit yourself and say, well, Facebook Marketplace, I never find any good deals. I'm not going to look at for sale by owners on there. I found a duplex that was on Facebook. You can find stuff like that all over the place. So
So is it more off market stuff?
When I always tell people, when realtors get involved, they, for good or bad, want to sell the house at what it's worth all the time. And the problem is it's just numbers sometimes to some realtors. And if you had someone who was elderly, or in the scenario I took where you were helping your mom in that scenario, you in that scenario you might be working a full-time job, have kids. You don't have time to go over to mom's house and try to fix it all up and work with contractors and do this. If you had the opportunity to sell it at, a price that you're happy with and the investor's happy with, because now they have to manage the new job, they have to do all the rehab. If you're comfortable with that and that works, it's great. When realtors get involved, they will try to sometimes take over I'll help you manage fixing it, and we'll get it up to X amount and then we'll sell it. And sometimes that works out great, but I know a lot of realtors, they'll start trying to help those ugly houses and they don't know how to manage all the workers and the rehab, and they end up going over budget. And now the seller's like, hey, you told me this would only cost X, and now it's much more than that. Right. It puts the realtors in a bad spot sometimes, but the realtors are always optimistic in the beginning. Yeah. Oh, we'll sell your house quick, no problem. And then it's, if things don't go the way they should, then it's kind of like, it's a tough spot. So
now, do you do the rehabs yourself, Trevor, or do you hire someone to do some of this?
So I'll typically GC them or general contract them. So what I'll do is I have a bunch of guys that I like to work with. I'll call them in and say, hey, here's the house. What can you do? What's the cost with this? And I'll get a few bids. And I always tell people, it doesn't matter if your best friend is a plumber. Your best friend may be super, super busy, and his time now has gone up. It's going to cost more, even though he's your friend. You're either going to get, I tell people there's always three elements to a contractor. It's going to be either quality, communication, or money. You're never going to get all three. If the communication's super good and they're cost effective, the quality is not going to be there. If the quality is good and the communication's great, guess what? That cost is not going to be low. You get one of those three. Or two of those three maximum. So the thing is always get multiple quotes, get multiple bids, reach out to people in the industry so you can build your team. And that's going to be how you're going to get the pricing to be able to do your rehabs and stuff like that. Because again, you want to do it in an effective manner, but the uglier the better the house is, because if you don't have any experience fixing a house and you find one that's been half burned from a lightning strike, it's going to be very overwhelming for you. And you're just going to be like, hey, I just want to get out of this. Right. And those are the type of houses that investors like to buy.
So when you're talking about the financing, and sorry if the lawn people, you can hear it because they just started mowing outside my office door window. When it comes to finding the money, like the hard money lender or, the investors, that maybe is where some of the people that are trying to start off are scared because they don't know where to look. Yeah. Do you have any tips for that on where they can go to find something that, to find the money to do the rehab or to even buy the property without it having to be their own money?
Yeah. Great question. Just like with everything, I'm going to tell them you need to reach out to a professional. So someone like yourself, either of y'all, someone like myself, and say, hey, here's my plan. I want to do this. Perfect. We'll be able to give you a handful of hard money lenders, and we'll say, hey, these guys are great for a flood unit because they're really good at giving. Maybe they give money quicker. All of these hard money lenders, think of them as like 5 rich uncles. They all have different backgrounds and different prerequisites and different goals of what they want to do, and they're giving you the money. Some of them, for example, have really high interest rates, which again, you're not that worried about because you're only going to be holding that loan for a small period of time, but it does matter. Some of them will have high interest rates. Some of them will charge you, instead of 2% in the beginning, maybe they charge you 1, maybe they charge you 3. So each one is a little different. And what I like to do, when I have clients or prospects call me, they'll say, hey, I'm looking to buy this house. here's what's going on with it. Do you have anyone that you recommend that I can help do this with? And I talk through it with them and say, great, here, I'm going to send you a couple of hard money lenders that I've worked with myself or I've helped other investors with, and give them a call and see kind of if you like them, if the conversation's great. And if it is, awesome. Go from there. I'm not a big fan of pretty much across the board of just Googling people like that. Because the problem is everyone looks great in the dating phase. It's after that. It's after you sign the dotted line that all of a sudden all of these things come out of the woodworks, all this baggage, and you're like, we need a divorce. Like, you want to get a recommendation from someone, like a warm recommendation. And who's better to go to than whoever you trust in lending? Because they will have a relationship. Because what I have to do is I have to work with that hard money lender to refinance them out of that loan. And having that relationship already makes it nice because I know what they're looking for. I know what they don't want. I can help them, the buyer, and say, hey, you need to make a company. Here's the type of company you should make. Try to give them advice to make their life easier. But there are, gosh, in DFW, we probably have hundreds, if not more, of hard money lenders. And they are going to range from terrible to awesome. There's just, it's like with everything else. So you may as well get a recommendation. But yeah, they should be calling people like us to get that.
Okay. You know, we've gone kind of into different things so far today when it comes to this. But we talk about the repeat, you know, the last R of the BRRRR method. What is kind of a time scale that you say, you know, if you're starting out, or if you're trying to build a portfolio of homes, you know, what is kind of the time frame that you would look to move to that next one? And how, you know, like, let's say for me, I'll put it out there, I want to have 10 homes over, you know, I don't have a time frame, but I want to buy 10 homes to build out a retirement portfolio that will start cash flowing, you know, in say 20 years. Because I mean, yeah, I'm still in my 60s in 20 years, so I'll be happy with that. But you know, kind of what kind of advice do you give to somebody in that situation that I've never bought a rental property, but that is something that we want to do?
Yeah.
What is that kind of repeat method after we get that first one you would recommend?
So let's assume the person has a team. So if we're talking about you know people, you know realtors, you know lenders, you know people in this space. Say you've done that, you have your contacts. Awesome. If you have a stable job, if you have a job that has money coming in regularly, so this is someone that, and it doesn't matter. I helped a kid in California. He was 19, lived at home with his mom. And if you have just a job, it doesn't have to be crazy, but you're able to stock away some money. I usually say, depending on how the investment is, if you have $20,000, for example, you can make this happen. So if you had $20,000, let's say, and it could be a little less, you could do this method. I would recommend not doing the second one until you have a stabilized tenant in the first one. And that's a whole other podcast talking about how to find tenants and retain them. But you get a tenant that's in there. You've already experienced maybe a couple months of that. You have enough money. I always tell people you want enough money to handle just sitting somewhere for at least your deductible on your insurance. So if you have your deductible sitting in a savings account, and you could have a little more depending on stuff, just like emergency, then I would start building your money back up and then repeat the cycle.
Okay.
So that kind of would depend on how much money you're making. If you're in a situation where you get steady income, great. You can track that out very easily. You know, I save an extra $2,000 a month. Okay. You could almost do one every year if you wanted to go that direction. If you're someone who's seasonal and you make big chunks of money, like an HVAC guy, you make a ton of money in the summer and it dies off. Okay. You're going to have a little bit different trajectory, or if you're commission based, but yeah, I would start saving up like the old school thermometer in high school or elementary school, fill it up. Great. Now it's house time. Start looking. And your best bet is to keep that thermometer full at all times. And even if it overflows, constantly keeping it there. That way, when a home presents itself, that is an opportunity, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
But, so you don't necessarily have to own a primary home currently to be able to do this.
Nope. You honestly, if you just had money you didn't even have a job, but somehow, someone passed away and left you $60,000, which this happens, and you don't have a job and you live at home, you absolutely could do this and flip into you're going to do the buy and hold, all the stuff from the beginning where you're going to use hard money, and then the refinance, you use a DSCR loan, which doesn't have any requirements that you have a job. They just need to make sure that the rent and the debt service are offsetting each other.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point. The DSCR part. What do hard money? Because I know what the DSCRs look for from a credit standpoint. What do hard monies look for on a, because somebody that doesn't have a job just got money, if they, what kind of credit do they have to be able to get that hard money loan? Because I don't think hard money people want to just give money out to people that aren't showing that they're paying their bills. So can you talk on that briefly for the viewers? Because I don't want people to think, oh, I've got a little bit of money. I got 20,000 or 40,000, but I don't have any credit. I don't want them thinking, oh, this is easy for them if it isn't. So.
Yeah, good question. Usually the lowest I've seen is in the mid sixes for a hard money loan. Just like with everything else, it's a sliding scale. You can expect if you're in the low sixes, mid sixes, that you will have more fees associated with that because you're a higher risk. Right. So better credit, my experience of people coming out of like high school, college, who have not really utilized credit a lot, their credit tends to be around 700. It's kind of like floating in that little pocket. You'd be fine. But yeah, if you've had some dings and gone through some life, you might need to work on that a little bit. But that's where talking to someone like a mortgage professional is going to be able to go in there, do a soft credit pull without dinging you and say, hey, here's where you are. Here's what we can do.
Yeah, put a plan together for that.
Yep.
I know we're starting to run out of time here, a little bit over as it is. Before we go, though, I do have one more question for you, Trevor. So back when you did your very first property, first of all, how old were you back then when you did your first one?
I was 25.
25. That's amazing. Boy, if I could go back to then and do this. Wow. So when you were 25, you did this first time. Looking back on that, what advice would you give people? Maybe, things you wish you would have done different, little mistakes or something that, advice that you would give from your own personal experience?
Short of saying start it earlier, which is what everyone will say, it would be using a method that didn't use all of my money. Because I was the person who bought the home, and I put, at the time, you could get a 15% down conventional loan.
Okay.
I just bought it straight off the MLS with the realtors we're using, and I put 15% down plus closing costs, and then I bought the home, and then I fixed it up with my own money, and I was the one doing the work or trying to learn how to do things. Wow. And I spent more time, but definitely way more of my own money. And once I realized I could use other people's money and then get to write off all the interest and all the other stuff, the tax side of things, it opened up the door to be able to repeat it so much faster. Because if I would have done that first way over and over again, I would have been waiting huge chunks of time, and I wouldn't be nearly where I am now with that.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, so we really want to thank you, Trevor, for coming on our show. We really do appreciate all the insights you're able to give our listeners out there. I know we could probably take this another half hour and keep going, diving even deeper, but do appreciate all the insights you were able to provide. If anyone out there is wanting, to talk with Trevor, additional questions for him, get some advice from him, Trevor, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, email is usually best. My email is Reed, REED, and that's at U Mortgage, so the letter U and then mortgage. And I respond to those. That's probably the easiest way. And then we can run through scenarios, and we can do a lot of these things we're talking about. But it's the best route. Okay. And we'll also put that on our YouTube channel. We'll put the information in there as well, the description of the show. Next week, we're going to continue on with our series on investment properties 101. The second part of this, we're actually going to bring back a special guest of ours, Ashley Henderson. Looking forward to having her back on the show to discuss further as far as different mortgages to be able to use for investment properties. So we're going to dive even deeper in, and we're going to talk to her a little bit further about house hacking as well. So be sure to tune in to that next week at our usual time,
Wednesday, 9 a.m. Central. And then I want to also thank everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate that. If you only caught part of the show or you want to catch up on some of the past shows, go to our YouTube channel at The Mojo Show Real Estate Podcast. And while you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we are on a mission to get to 1,000 subscribers. So Trevor, make sure you go there and hit the subscribe button for us. Before we close out the show, Joe, any last words or nuggets of advice for everyone?
Just, this is a great way to get your money working for yourself or other people's money working for you by listening to these tips. Trevor, thank you for coming on. And next week, with Ashley coming on, Trevor and Ashley have worked together quite a bit, and Trevor's taught her a lot of things that, she has helped with the last time she was on the show. So we appreciate you, Trevor, for coming on, and thank you for all the help that you give everybody when it comes to buying investment properties.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I'm Joe Mortgage, and that handsome guy with the beard over there is Cup of Joe Mortgage, and we'll see you next week.
Mr.